What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so Donald Trump is trailing Governor Ron DeSantis, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, by 45 percentage points in the state of Florida in a new poll that was conducted in that state. So this poll was conducted by Sachs Media and presented in a newsletter produced by Florida Politics. And this poll has Ron DeSantis up 66% to 21% for Donald Trump. When asked who they trust more to be a good role model for young people, respondents chose DeSantis over Trump 89% to 4%. A significant 81% of participants said they have more faith in DeSantis to, quote, have a moral foundation for choices. Over three-quarters of respondents, 76%, believe DeSantis is more capable than Trump of uniting voters around a common cause. On diplomatic affairs, 68% of surveyed residents said DeSantis is more likely to be respected by other world leaders compared to 26% for Trump. The poll was conducted on November 11th, just 3 days after Election Day, using a random sample of a, quote, minimum of 600 respondents, representing a spectrum of demographics including race, gender, age, political affiliation, and religion. The poll has a plus-minus margin of 4%. So, what do you take from this? Well, I mean, look, this is November of 2022. The primaries aren't until at least January, I believe, of 2024. So you really don't take much of anything from this other than the fact that right now in this snapshot of time, Donald Trump is at a low point. All but one of his major party candidates that he backed, I think that was J.D. Vance of Ohio. Other than J.D. Vance, all of them were losers on election night. For the most part, it wasn't even close with most of these candidates. Despite the fact that Carrie Lake, the Republican candidate that he backed for governor of Arizona, despite the fact that she was up in a majority of polls leading into Election Day, she still narrowly lost to Katie Hobbs. So you look at the fact that what was supposed to be a red wave election, many people in the party, not just in the media, but in the party itself, they blamed Donald Trump. You could argue that what caused this shift was many of, not just Trump, and not just his rhetoric, but many of the candidates that backed Trump. You know, the election denying, much of those forces led to the pressure to overthrow Roe versus Wade, which was a factor, especially in the Northeast, as far as some of the erosion of the Republican strength in suburban areas. And, look, you could argue that a lot of this election started to become a referendum on Trump just as much as it was on Biden in some areas. And that wasn't the case earlier this year. And at the end of the day, this just isn't a good time for Donald Trump, man. It's a great time for Ron DeSantis. He was just reelected by a 19-point landslide over former Governor Charlie Crist and former senator. And at the end of the day, he's at a high tide right now. Now, what makes this bad is people have to remember, Florida is Trump's home state too. He changed that. It used to be New York. Now it's Florida. You have to wonder, for strategic purposes, whether or not he may try to change his home state back to New York. Just to save the embarrassment of perhaps losing Florida in the primaries. That's his home state. But right now, Ron DeSantis is the governor, who's extraordinarily popular right now, at least. But like I said before, man, you're talking about a primary campaign that's not even within a year. January 2024 is when the primaries are going to start kicking off. So we're nowhere near that. We got a whole nother calendar year to get through. Hopefully we do get through it all together, and we'll all still be here in 2024. But I will say this. I'll go out on a limb and say this. While we have no idea what's going to happen in 2024, we don't know who's going to run, per se. We think we know who's going to run, but we don't know who's going to run right now. But I will say this. Trump is in a very weakened position compared to 2016 and 2020. He's in a very weakened position. In my opinion, if he's running, let's just say he's running in a race that has, let's just throw some candidates out there. Because DeSantis and Trump are not going to be the only nominees. Not nominees, excuse me. They're not going to be the only candidates running for the nomination. You're most likely going to have Ted Cruz run. He runs every fucking year. I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Pence runs. Now, as far as Lynn Cheney is concerned, she may run in some primaries. I'm not sure about what her ultimate goal is, but let's just say it's a crowded field. I think the more crowded the field is, the more that helps Trump. But if it's more or less a one-on-one race between him and DeSantis, I think Trump's in a seriously weakened and troubled position. Because I think the Republican Party as a whole, they're tired of him. They're losing. And they've become a much more marginalized party than they've ever been. Look, in 2008 and 2012, you could chalk it up to, hey, they're just running against a charismatic, once-in-a-lifetime candidate in Barack Obama. But do you know that Trump has never matched? He's never really matched Mitt Romney's 47.2% of the vote. He's come close, but he's never matched it, even as an incumbent president. And if anything, Trump is eroding support, more and more support from suburbs. So, if Trump is the nominee, let's just say somehow, some way, he pulls off this slight miracle, and by today's numbers, and he captures the nomination. I've said this before in a video I did last week. Rematches almost always favor the winner. Not always, but if there's no economic collapse going on, or unpopular war, or something like that, there's relative prosperity, peace and prosperity at home. Generally speaking, rematches favor the candidate that won in the last contest. And if that's the case, Trump will be in trouble if he runs against Joe Biden. I wouldn't even be surprised if the economy is in an upswing in 2024. I wouldn't even be surprised if in Texas, because I think Cruz runs for re-election in 2024, I wouldn't be surprised if he lost. And I still don't think Texas is ready to turn blue yet, but if Cruz ran for re-election against a strong Democratic candidate in 2024 in Texas, I wouldn't be surprised if Cruz lost. But I don't think Texas is ready to turn blue yet on a national level as far as presidential election. But I think that's going to come by 2032 or 28. The Republican Party is in serious jeopardy, and they don't realize it yet. They don't realize it. They don't realize. Greg Abbott should have won by 10 points on Election Day. He should have won by 10 to 15 points, but he didn't. So that's all I got to say about this right now. Like I said before, just guesstimating, just throwing this out there. I would think this DeSantis would have advantages running in states with certain key demographics in the primaries. States that have a high Latino population. Florida, that's his home state. Texas, California, Arizona, New Mexico, right? I think DeSantis has an advantage in those states. I also think that DeSantis has an advantage in states where religion, you have a lot of religious conservatives. Off the top of my head, maybe Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma. He may have an advantage in some of those states. Utah is Mormon country, but by default, maybe DeSantis will have an advantage there. So I do think if it's DeSantis and Trump, for the most part, as far as the primary is concerned, if it's just those two, DeSantis will be a very formidable candidate. But anyway, tell me what you guys think.